Welcome to A Delhi Love, Ishq Mohabbat Pyar, the podcast that treats Delhiwalas to captivating conversations on living and loving all things Delhi. Delhi is not just a place, it's a state of mind, an attitude that leaves a mark on everyone who visits or calls it home. I'm Yasmin Kidwai, your host, a documentary filmmaker, former municipal councillor, and at heart, the quintessential Delhi girl. I love how Delhi is both old and new at the same time. I value its history and heritage and love exploring the new aspects of the city we share. I'm no expert, but I grew up in the gullies here, enjoyed public service here, and just like you, shared a deep passion for Delhi's enigmatic soul. Together, let's embrace the delightful contradictions that make Delhi the city it is. After all, around every corner, there must be 1,000 dastans to share in this megacity of a million conversations.
Today, Old Delhi and Chandni Chowk are almost interchangeable names. It's a place we may go when we feel nostalgic or romantic about Delhi, or we crave certain kinds of Delhi food. But Chandni Chowk was originally only a small part of Shah Jahan's imperial city, Shahjahanabad, which was completed in the 17th century. A walled city large enough to live in, but small enough to walk. A city, some say, imbued with Sule-Kul, the Mughal doctrine of tolerance towards all. As a result, right from the beginning, Shahjahanabad was home to a diverse community. Jains, Sikhs, Hindus and Muslims from all walks of life. Even today, Shahjahanabad is mini India. Popular film songs like Kajrari from the film Bunty or Bubbly keep the romance of Dariba and Balli Maran alive in our memory. And films like Delhi 6 bring to life the magically syncretic world of those living in the area around pin code 6. But have you ever wondered why Old Delhi, Shahjahanabad, Delhi 6, whichever way you say it, fascinates us so much? That's because Old Delhi was the birthplace of what we call Delhi ka adab or Delhi's culture. So how did this ancient city come to be? What heights did it reach? And how has it played a pivotal role in shaping the language and culture of North India? How did it survive Nader Shah's invasion, the revolt of 1857 and the pains of partition? You cannot understand why our city is the way it is without having experienced Old Delhi. The lens of the past shows us who we are and why that is worth preserving. Today we are meeting Dr. Swapna Liddle again, a Delhi-based Indian historian, author, art curator and heritage conservator, and digging a little deeper. Dr. Liddle was the convener of the Delhi chapter of INTAC and has also been involved in heritage preservation and is known to strongly advocate for people's participation if heritage preservation is to be meaningful and successful. We have met her once before in the context of learning about New Delhi, and if you haven't heard that episode, please do. Today we are traveling with her even further into the past, into Shahjahanabad, or what we call Chandni Chowk, which continues to be a living city with history, stories and legends around every corner. Welcome once again, Swapna ji. So, one of our guests on the show was saying that one cares even a little bit about the history of India and calls himself a Delhiite. The least one can do is to visit Shahjahanabad. And of course, Delhi and Shahjahanabad was one and the same at one point of time. How did the city become so important in the Indian psyche as the heart of the subcontinent?
Thank you once again, Yasmin, for having me on your podcast. I think I was listening to this podcast by Sohail Hashmi you had, and he was talking when you asked him about his favorite walks or which are the ones that people find most fascinating. He said the number one is, they say, Chandni Chowk jana hai humko, because which is Shahjahanabad, of course. So yes, it's got huge amount of history. It is also a living city, because we are used to monuments. TK monument hai, there's a ruin of a city, there's an old fort or something, but this is a living thing that you can see, and it still has that flavor of an old city, and it has huge amounts of history. I think what makes it so special or made it so special was this was a city that was founded at a time when the Mughals were at the height of their extent of their empire. Under Shah Jahan, not only had the territorial extent become amazing. The resources of the empire, it was a rich empire, it was a multicultural, multi-ethnic empire. So at that stage this city gets founded, and it's very interesting because it gets founded at this particular time. It has people who are coming from all parts of the world. It's one of the major world cities, right? So there are people coming from all parts of the world to stay here and spend time here, to work here. It has the best craftsmen around the world, around the country at least, have put in their resources, their talents to build this city. So it's a truly magnificent. And of course the Mughals also want to make, or Shah Jahan particularly wants to make a political statement out of this. So the wide road which Chandni Chowk becomes, it's a way to showcase the grandeur of the Mughal empire, to have these grand processions around it. Very political statement. Also, if you look at all the gates of the city, one is called Delhi Gate because it faces the older cities of Delhi. One is Ajmeri Gate because it faces Ajmer. One is Lahore because it faces Lahore. Kabul faces Kabul. Kashmir faces Kashmir. It is symbolically, these gates and the roads leading from them are connecting all the far-flung provinces of this empire to the heart, which is Delhi. You know, so there's a lot of symbolism in how this city comes to be founded, how it comes to be designed. So that is really.
And why didn't the Mughals were for centuries in Agra? Why did Shah Jahan decide to move the capital to here in the first place?
Good question. You know, there's a lot of confusion about this because the way his chroniclers have written about it and how later people have also interpreted it is very conflicting. People say that the weather of Delhi was better. I think that's a very moot point. Between Agra and Delhi, kya difference is there? Or they say that Agra had become very crowded. I think the main thing is, first of all, you must realize Shah Jahan is a very ambitious builder. His major passion is building. He's already started work on the Taj Mahal by this point. In whatever he could do in the Agra fort also he has done. He has demolished a lot of the older buildings. He's built marble palaces there, etc. But like one of his chroniclers does mention, that for a great builder, the ultimate ambition is to build a city, to leave his stamp on a city which will rival the cities of the world. And you know, they're always looking to see to rival Baghdad and to rival Isfahan. Isfahan used to be one major benchmark. You don't have to be better than the Iranians. So rival Cairo. So that ambition is there to build a great city. So he decides, but it's not just that. Where this city is going to be built is also important. And it has to be Delhi ultimately. Why? Because Delhi for centuries has been growing, has developed this, it's got a reputation, an aura of power. It has been the capital already for centuries. You'd be very surprised to know that, for instance, Akbar fairly early in his reign transferred the capital to Agra because for very practical reasons. It was further south. That was the direction in which the empire was expanding. He wanted to keep an eye there, right? So he moves the capital to Agra. Jahangir also continues to reign from there. However, it is very interesting that, you know, Sanskrit inscriptions are there of Akbar's time, which refer to Akbar as Dillishwar. What does Dillishwar mean? The Lord of Delhi. So in people's mind, he's an emperor because he is the king, he's the ruler of Delhi. Delhi is his, he's the ruler of Delhi. I mean, nobody says Agra ka Badshah, right? There is a bridge which connects, Red Fort to Salimgarh. And that used to have a plaque which is now kept in the museum, which is from Jahangir's time. Jahangir had that bridge built, and that inscription refers to Jahangir as Shahenshah-e Delhi.
Oh, okay.
Shahenshah-e Delhi. Jahangir never ruled from Delhi, but he, in people's minds, he is the Shahanshah of Delhi, because Babur, when he comes to Delhi, he defeats the Lodhis, right? Ibrahim Lodhi. Ibrahim Lodhi already had his capital in Agra, because Sikandar Lodhi had moved the capital there. What is Sikandra today was founded by Sikandar Lodhi. But Babur says, and he defeats Ibrahim Lodhi at Panipat, and he immediately comes to Delhi, and where he does a sort of like, he visits all the old tombs and all that, and he says Delhi is the capital of all Hindustan. Why? Ibrahim Lodhi is ruling from Agra. Why are you saying this? The idea had already developed in people's minds that this is the center of power, this is the capital. And Shah Jahan wants to also, he wants to make his capital in this place which has this aura.
And how long did it take for him to be able to build the city as he wanted?
What Shah Jahan did was, he set his builders, the task that he gave them was, build the citadel first, the palace complex where I will have and what we call the Red Fort today. That is the citadel, which has the emperor's own living areas, today you would call it the Central Vista of today, or the Lutyens Delhi of today, where you have the important public buildings, where the business of empire goes on, right? All the departments and all of that. So that's what he gets them to build. And simultaneously, of course, what happens is, so the fort really, if you look at the foundation of the fort, which is laid in, I think it is laid in 1639, and the inauguration happens 1648. So 9 years the fort takes to build, and that is formally the inauguration of the city. Also he shifts, yes. And we have less precise dates for what is going on in the rest of the city, but one is assuming that simultaneously other people are also building their houses. Dara Shikoh, for instance, starts to build a big haveli just north of the fort, and then there are other palaces, other nobility are building their structures. Shah Jahan invites, for instance, he invites Jain, a very prominent Jain merchant from Hisar, Deep Chand Sar, to build his. So Deep Chand Sar built his house, and his 16 sons, their houses he builds, which is the origin of our Dariba. So there are various people who begin to build. And it's interesting that the rest of the city, what happens is that the wall is made, the main roads are made, and some landmarks, but the rest of the city is organically created by the people who live in it. They build their own homes and their bazaars.
People have been called from Agra.
Yes, I mean, of course, there are some people who are called from Agra, in the sense, who are the people who have to move.
Student, for example.
Not necessarily. The people who have to move are government officials.
Yes, of course.
If the capital is moving to Delhi, they'll all automatically move. There are a lot of people who move because this is now the place which is going to be the center of power. This is where, if you're a big trader, it makes sense for you to make your at least set up a important part of your establishment over here. So those people. There are other people who are looking for jobs. The same reason why people come to a capital city today, right? They're coming for education, they're going for employment opportunities, all those sort of things. So those are the kind of people who move. It's a very natural process. It's not as if people are forcibly removed, right? So they come for opportunity.
Tell me, I understand Vastu Shastra was contributed to the shape of the walled city. What were the other key? Did he have some ideas about the architectural design he wanted to emulate here?
There are some theories that have been put forward over there. We don't get any specific references in the chronicles really, but yes, we can speculate on some people have said that this whole idea of half moon structure around, or a bow shaped structure with the river at one side is relates to the Vastu. So that can be speculated. More interestingly, the position where he locates it in a part of the river, on the bank of the river, which is Nigambodh. Nigambodh is a very, very ancient site which is considered sacred by many of the Hindus who were living here. So he takes that as his kind of focal point and makes a city next to it.
And what was he, like you're saying, the grandeur of the Mughal Empire had to come through, and so there was this, the Jharoka, there was this Diwan-e-Aam. All this was very important for him. Again, messaging, I think, was a major part of the design and building of the capital. Yeah.
Messaging is very, very important. So it's interesting how the decoration happens, right? So, for instance, the major darbars that used to be the Diwan-e-Khas-o-Aam, which we now call the Diwan-e-Aam. So, uske piche, where he used to sit on the throne, behind the throne there are these inlay panels. And many of these inlay panels were actually imported from Florence. They have this beautiful pietra dura, lots of birds and flowers and things. So there are these many birds behind the. So it's like there is this very famous art historian, Ebba Koch, who has written about this, and she says that the reason why you see all these great birds is because in a lot of, shall we say, Islamicate writing, the ideal ruler is believed to be Solomon. And in a lot of the imagery that surrounds King Solomon, who is famous for his justice and all, he is shown as surrounded by birds and animals. He is ruling over all the realms. So that imagery is Shah Jahan wants to recreate, to project himself as Solomon. Also, there is behind where he sits centrally, there's a very small panel it's from Florence. So its original meaning was in the European classical context. It shows the Greek god Orpheus, who's playing a musical instrument, and all sorts of animals are collected around him. So Ebba Koch again has this theory, and I think it's a very convincing one, that Shah Jahan wanted to project this whole thing that he is ruling over a world where there is reconciliation between different predator. There's so much peace that the predator and prey are also reconciled. They are gathered around
and
him.
And there's art and culture thriving because there's music.
Yes. Yeah. So this idea that because there are, of course, even before Shah Jahan, in Jahangir's time, for instance, there are a lot of paintings which are made which show him standing on a globe which has a lion and a lamb together.
That concept of Sule Kul was very important.
Exactly. So that is a very important part of the message that the Mughals try to give out. The other message is that of justice. So the Diwan-e-Aam, of course, is where the big darbar happens, but where the emperor sits and actually works, that is in a building which is called the Khas Mahal. And that Khas Mahal, he had a kind of a low throne over there where he used to sit, and that is the place where he would talk to his ministers, where he would do the kind of things that a head of state does, deal with correspondence, is this thing. So that's where his actual business goes on, and he used to, and behind him is this panel, and there's this lovely panel. It is framed with a arch, and that arch has a sun, and the sun was royalty, so that is right above, but behind is a scales of justice. So scales of justice right above his head. So the idea is to project the Mughal emperor as somebody who promotes harmony, who promotes justice. Also the idea that the emperor is in some way a reflection of God himself, that the divinity in some way he reflected, and that was also something that was very much taken by the Mughals from an Indian tradition, right? The concept of a Jharoka Darshan, that every morning the emperor would sit in a window, and this was from Akbar's time, that he would sit in a window so that particularly people used to go to bathe in the Yamuna, and as they're coming back they will see the Mughal emperor and pay obeisance to him, to be blessed by that sight. But it also, that concept of Jharoka Darshan, of course it was for the glory of the emperor to project him like that, but it was also a very practical thing. In later times we hear that a lot of people, that was their occasion to, if they had to say something to the emperor, maybe directly, this is the time to say it. It's like a informal, darbar becomes very formal. So how you are admitted to the darbar, this is access, because he's sitting there. And we have later chronicles which say that the emperor would sit there. Somebody comes up and says, Jahanpana, we have this problem. I'm having this problem. And he would immediately tell his secretary who would be with him, okay, make a note of this and we will talk about it. So, this is a way of connecting with the people.
Without elections.
So there were these many different ways in which the architecture itself, talks, it tells us a lot about the Mughal ideology.
And how did the lifestyle of the residents of Shahjahanabad differ from people living in other parts of the Mughal empire?
Because it is such a cosmopolitan city, there are people from all over who are settled here. It also receives a lot of patronage because there are rich people settled here, the royal family is settled here. We must not underestimate the influence of other members of the royal family apart from the emperor.
Particularly, we know of the Jains. And there were other communities also.
Many. Anybody, we look at Armenians, we are looking at French people, from all over the world people used to come in. There are British, of course. So they would come and settle over here, right? Portuguese. It becomes a place of cultural interaction. It therefore becomes, say, the place where the Urdu language, what we call today the Urdu language, flourishes. That is a very important part of that, what makes Shahjahanabad really distinctive, is this rich literary culture that flourishes over here also. That's an important thing, and pinnacles of architectural excellence also. Jama Masjid, for instance. It is just such a brilliant example of the kind of architecture that Shah Jahan achieves, that it becomes a sort of hegemonic style for every mosque that comes, Mughal mosque that comes afterwards. It follows that three-dome pattern.
And nothing was just for ornamental purposes. Everything was supposed to be, was what would be used by the residents.
Because Shahjahanabad was such a multicultural place, its opportunities that it offered attracted people from not even different parts of India but all over the world, and that made it a place where all sorts of different languages were spoken. People brought their own habits and their own customs. It was a place of interaction, and that's one of the results is, for instance, the development of the Urdu language, and the development of Urdu language, which grows eventually into a major literary language also. And Delhi becomes a major center for poetry and all those things. Of course, Persian is already there, which is Farsi, which is the language of the empire of higher administration, but Urdu is bilkul Delhi ki deen hai. Also, there are things like food, culture, music, dance. These are all things which are flourishing in Delhi. So Delhi people are cosmopolitan, they are modern. So I remember there is this there's this text, I think it's Darya-e-Latafat, which was written a little later in the early 19th century, but by Inshallah Khan Shah. And it has these stock kind of, it's on linguistics, but it has this interaction. It gives examples of people's conversation. One of the things is Delhi women are like thinking, people coming from outside think, Delhi women are always, they're too busy to do things. They are getting food from outside, There are passers-by, there are these hawkers and things like that. They buy so much food from there. But it's a sign of a modern, very urban milieu.
And
that
prosperous.
People don't bother to cook in the house or cook less. They just
they get it.
food.
Interesting, huh? That time women are getting food from outside. So what role did, how inclined was Shah Jahan towards culture and this thing that and it must have contributed?
It does contribute. Shah Jahan, of course, his abiding passion is architecture. Also, we must remember that the Mughal emperors did not really stay in one place for very long, even in their own capital. You have to imagine that it's a period before the modern means of communication. If an emperor has to keep track of what's going on in his empire, he has to be on the move a lot. So Shah Jahan used to travel a lot, as did his successor Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb spent a lot of his time in the Deccan, in fact. So because of all this travel and not being around, and he had very important business to do also. So not so directly involved, but certainly members of his family, his daughters, for instance. We often forget about the women in Mughal India, and we shouldn't, because they are very, very influential. Even, we know at most maybe about Nur Jahan's impact. But somebody like Jahan Ara, for instance, who is Shah Jahan's daughter, by the time Delhi is founded, Mumtaz has died, Mumtaz Mahal. But Jahan Ara, who's their daughter, the oldest daughter, she is a very important and influential figure. She is, first of all, she is well educated, but she has means also. She's a very rich woman. She has enormous resources. So she is a patron. She patronizes things like, she has this major garden called Sahibabad, Bagh Sahibabad, which is that garden in some form is still there today. Town hall ke piche. There is that where there's a Mahatma Gandhi statue and all that. That green area, that was a big garden which Jahan Ara had used to own. And in front of that, what the original Chandni Chowk was, which is right in front of the town hall, jahan se aaj nayi sadak nikalti hai. That was a chalk. It was an 8-sided chalk, in the middle of which there was a pool of water. And that pool of water used to deflect the moonlight, and hence Chandni Chowk. Beside that, so that Chandni Chowk, it was not just a square, but it was lined by shops. And in these shops, you had luxury goods. It was a high upmarket kind of market. So it had all these wonderful shops. It had coffee shops, kahve khane, where people used to drink coffee. The poets used to recite their, very much like today's cafes and bookshops and things like that, right? So this is where, people used to gather. And right next to it, where you have the town hall today, was a big sarai. And in today's terms, you would call it like a 5-star hotel, because it was a very fancy sarai where all the rich merchants coming from outside used to stay. And opposite, on the other side of the chalk, jahan se aaj nayi sadak nikalti hai, there was a hammam, a public bath. So all of these amenities, it was a very, as I said, a cosmopolitan, buzzing city.
So was it important? Because of this concept of Sulekul, and the emperor did want to give a message that there is peace and all. So I think that kind of encouraged, because culture and art can only thrive, if everything is peaceful around it. Yes. And did also Shahjahanabad play a role in the artistic and cultural development of the rest of the Mughal Empire? Did it have an influence?
Also, we must realize that there are many, many other important cities of the world, of the Mughal Empire as well. So they all have their own trajectories, smaller qasbas and also do. But I think in that sense, things like the Urdu language, etc., is the major cultural.
How did Urdu actually start developing here?
Urdu is based on Khadi Boli, which is the local language spoken in the region around Delhi. And because there are so many speakers of Turki, Farsi, Punjabi who are all living in Delhi, they all contribute their own vocabulary to this Khadi Boli, and that is the origin of Urdu. So that's how it comes about.
That's how you call it Delhi ki Dein, huh? The language.
Yes. Yeah.
So while the city was established, and though it's a walled city and that's how it's referred to, it did not have any defensive structures. So that there was an openness to it. How did that work out for in historical terms, like both good and bad?
Yeah. At the time at which Shahjahanabad was built, it was at the heart of a very secure, very large empire. Nobody thought that this city would be attacked. It's not a frontier town where you need strong.
When Nadir Shah came and butchered the city.
Yeah. But of course what happens is history marches on and things change, and therefore what was once the heart of the empire becomes very vulnerable to attacks like that of Nadir Shah. So that definitely does happen, that you have people coming from outside and attacking it, and though of course the fact that attacks first happen outside, so Nadir Shah, the main defeat of the Mughal army happens at Karnal. The coming of Nadir Shah to Delhi is a kind of an after
but he does
party as far as Nadir Shah is concerned.
But he does come and butcher the entire city.
But what happened? That also actually has a very interesting story behind it, because again we tend to not put these things in perspective. What happens is Nadir Shah has defeated the imperial army at Karnal. Now he wants a show of submission from Muhammad Shah, the Mughal ruler. So they come to Delhi. Muhammad Shah comes first. He gets the place readied. He gets the Red Fort all cleaned up and all that. Nadir Shah comes. He is received in the Red Fort. Muhammad Shah also gives him, his crown in submission, and Nadir Shah accepts it and very magnanimously gives it back, saying, you take this, I'll be happy with a ransom.
Okay.
He's not interested in ruling.
He's staying. He had no interest.
He just wants to loot and go. But he has at that stage no intention of killing the people of Delhi. He is interested in his nice ransom. He is interested in a symbolic submission that
which has already happened.
So he's got what he wanted. However, the people of Delhi are something else, because again the people of Delhi also have this kind of आजकल की लैंग्वेज में क्या बोलेंगे, थोड़ा दबंग टाइप के.
I was going to ask you, what does it say about us?
So what happens is कि Nadir Shah is sitting in the Red Fort, is being lavishly entertained over there, and his soldiers. So most of his soldiers were actually outside the city walls. He camped over there. 30,000 जहाँ है वहाँ पे सारा कैंप कर दिया है. Some soldiers come into the city because after all now they are off duty. War तो हो गया. They are out of duty. They want to बाजार में घूम रहे हैं, ये वो कर रहे हैं. अब प्रॉब्लम ये है कि उसी टाइम होली का टाइम था. So the Delhi people are not only they are like first angry with these soldiers who have invaded, but they are also a little high. So they said that many of them intoxicated. Holi was a period where bhang and all was. So they are a little intoxicated also. They kill one or two of these soldiers. So you can imagine, this guy has come, Nadir Shah has come, his army has defeated the Mughals, and the Delhi people have the audacity to actually kill some of his soldiers. That's what is the spark. And that's why he said कि जहाँ भी ये सब हुआ है, wherever this has happened, that people have attacked my soldiers, in those localities we will have a massacre of male members. So he orders this, and then of course it is said that he sat on the steps of the Sunehri
and he watched
Masjid,
it all,
and he watched it until Muhammad Shah sends his high nobles to him, say, please stop.
Stop this. Yeah.
Please stop this, we will give you more money. So they are then made to pay a bigger penalty, and this time the city's people also, again, they all expected to contribute. A big sum is given to him and he goes away.
But Shahjahanabad rises once again and becomes a living city. What does it say about the
Resilience. Resilience. So that's very interesting that at this point there is, while this invasion of Nadir Shah and all is happening, there is this guy called Dargah Quli Khan, who comes from the Deccan, and he's living in the city. And if you read, he's written a book which is in Farsi. It's called Murakka-e-Delhi, or if you read it, आपको लगेगा ही नहीं कि this is a period of so much upheaval, so much violence and all that, because he's talking about ये मेला होता है, फिर वो मेला होता है, फिर वो त्योहार होता है. So the people of Delhi are still party.
Yeah.
So, one thing that we must realize, when these kind of invasions take place also, the reason why, of course, Nadir Shah, it is a problem because a lot of people are killed also.
Yes.
Some 20,000, I think, is the usual estimate who may have been killed, which in those days, at any time it's huge.
It's a huge number.
Time it's huge.
Yeah.
But as far as the economic impact of these kind of things is, from an economic point of view, this is the wealth that is stored wealth. This is the hoarded wealth. This is the immobile, unliquid.
So the economy can take off.
Yeah,
again.
so that gets taken away, skimmed off, but the basic economy is not affected by these kind of things.
Shahjahanabad also became the epicenter of the first war of independence, the mutiny, and the rebels came and fought here in the name of the Mughal Empire. So naturally, how did this unfold in Shahjahanabad? Because at that time there was not this concept of one Indian sentiment; it hadn't crystallized, and soldiers were coming from all over to fight in the name of the Mughal Empire. How did that affect Shahjahanabad?
So, for that, actually, one has to give a little bit of background as to what had happened in 1803, or maybe even go back a little. So, after Aurangzeb's death, which takes place in 1707, the Mughal Empire transitions to a period where there is a lot of infighting and factionalism in the court. There are puppet emperors who are being put up by various factions. There is a lot of fragmenting of the empire itself. A lot of its provinces break up, become independent. There are different forces like the Marathas, the Sikhs, etc., which are political movements for independence, which are what happens is that every time that you have an empire like this, if the center becomes a little weak, then the provinces obviously rise up. So that is what is happening to the Mughal Empire as well. As a result of which, what happens is that the Mughals, even by the late 18th century, not only had there already been a lot of civil wars and things like that, but the Mughal emperor was feeling so helpless that I'm not being able to collect my revenues even from my, even the shrunken territories that I still have, that he invites the Marathas and say, please help me do this. So the Marathas begin to rule on behalf of the Mughal emperor as his deputies. By Marathas, I mean specifically Scindia, Mahadji Scindia. He becomes a deputy. So he rules even Delhi on behalf of the Mughals.
Okay.
So the Mughals, in fact, Shahjahanabad has these very interesting names like Jogiwada, Maliwada, Vaidwada.
Which comes from
Vada का नाम कहाँ से आया है? It's from the Maratha period of history, right? So the Marathas are ruling Delhi by the late 18th century. Interestingly, I must tell you, when we talk about even the Maratha period, it is such a multicultural entity that we are talking about. The Kotwal of Delhi, Kotwal used to be what you would today call the police commissioner. He's the head of the police department, right? So, the Kotwal of Delhi was a Frenchman during Maratha rule.
Okay.
It's that
Yeah.
You know, that kind of a thing is there. But anyhow, Marathas are ruling. In the meanwhile, the British East India Company has become powerful in
Yes.
Bengal, and it is
Yes.
slowly coming, you know, it's conquering places. It finally comes into sort of conflict with the Marathas, because the Marathas are a major force in North India, right? So the East India Company has these wars with which we studied in our history books as Anglo-Maratha wars. And in 1803, they defeat the forces of Mahanji Scindia, and they then capture Delhi and become the rulers of.
This is in 1803.
Yeah.
This happens. Yeah.
So what happens is that they have become the de facto rulers, though for a long time they are still pretending that they are ruling on behalf of the
Mughal Emperor. Yeah.
Yeah. So simply because the Mughal Emperor has so much symbolic value, people still think of the Mughal Emperor as the legitimate ruler. So they can't like
Just
push him
do
aside.
away with him.
They still have to use his name to shelter behind. So that is what that whole first half of the 19th century is about. How the British East India Company comes to rule India on behalf of the Mughal Emperor, in the name of the Mughal Emperor, while slowly trying to sideline the Mughal Emperor also. That is what is happening. But, of course, colonial rule is unlike any other rule that we had faced until then, because this is a very different kind of power. When the British East India Company first starts to conquer parts of India, nobody realized why it was different. After all, it was conquering land, and in those days,
Which has always been done.
in those days, conquest was a legitimate way of regime change, right?
Correct.
A new ruler comes because he's conquered the land, and that's fine. That's the way, normal way things go on. So nobody thought that this was anything wrong with it. So they are the new rulers, fine. What people only later realize, and that's because we in hindsight appreciate that it's colonialism, that they are drawing up all the revenues from this land and transferring them
Is outside, yeah.
That is
Yeah.
what's different, right? And because of that, their policies start to have a terrible impact on peasants, on artisans, on weavers, all those kind of economic impacts of nationalism, right? And that leads to finally a position where a lot of people are discontented. And the Bengal army, because the armies are all Indian mostly, the Bengal army, there's a lot of discontent growing in it for various reasons. There is this idea that it's the cartridge, the greased cartridge, which is supposed to have animal fat in it. Which,
the trigger point,
So it may be a trigger point, but it's not the only reason. The reason is much, much more widespread of the kind of economic distress that colonialism is causing. So you have these soldiers who mutiny in Meerut. They kill their officers, and the one thing in their minds is, let's go to Delhi. Why Delhi? Because still, no matter what has happened, in people's minds, the Mughals are still the legitimate rulers, and they are the only people who can kind of be used as a alternative to British rule. So slowly, not only these people come to Delhi, but slowly soldiers who start mutinying in different parts of North India
keep coming into the city.
One by one, they all come in, and a lot of people of the city join in them also.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
There are soldiers also. Delhi is very interesting because the kind of people who specifically join these soldiers, many of them are also of the laboring classes. They and there's some amount of also opportunistic violence and looting that happens. Some of them take advantage of that, but a lot of them join them out of conviction also. Of the ordinary people, there is a bit of a class divide also. A lot of the elite are not convinced that this is a wise thing to do. In fact, even Bahadur Shah, who's the Mughal emperor.
Doesn't want it in his name.
Initially, he is very uncertain about this because he feels, what have you done? He tells them, what have you done? You have killed your officers, you've come here. The British will come back and they'll kill you, and they'll kill all the people in this city also if they are supporting you, right? So he thinks that it's not a wise thing, but ultimately his own sons and grandsons, they say, if our family fortunes have to be saved, this is the only chance that we have. So therefore he then begins to support them. But there are these misgivings, and a lot of the elite, particularly the rich people and all that, are they have two problems. One is the violence. They are very unhappy about the violence, and we have a lot of stories of people who actually, particularly when you come to women and children of the British and Europeans and British people who were killed.
Yeah, there were these two instances. Yeah.
So there are people who try and save them also. There are people on principle who think that this violence is not good. So that is one aspect. And one is that a lot of them, their property gets looted and all also. Or rather they are asked to support all these soldiers coming, so there are economic demands on them and all that.
And we tend to forget it's not like something which happened in a flash. It is again over a period of some time that this is the mutiny unfolds.
For people to be persuaded that this is a good idea to do this, it takes time. So it is a very complex period, but 1857 is very fair, and it leads ultimately to poetry written in Urdu and all those kind of things. Very
also happen. But since Shahjahanabad became the epicenter of this, and naturally after the British were able to conquer and they won, they wanted to break Delhi's hold on its people. And is that why the capital was shifted first to Shimla and then to Calcutta? And that would have affected, or that time would not have been nice for Shahjahanabad, because suddenly patronage and everything was going to go from here.
Actually, what had happened was that for the British, Shahjahanabad had not been the capital anyway. They had always ruled from Calcutta. So Calcutta was their headquarters, and Delhi had really had ceased to be a capital in any real sense. With the decline of the Mughal emperor, its importance had reduced. So though its symbolic importance was there, its real political importance had dwindled a lot. What had happened was, even though this actual political importance had dwindled, economic importance had dwindled, but because its culture was already so vibrant, that culture had survived. So this is the period of the East India Company. This is the period of the poets like Zauq and Bahadur Shah Zafar and Ghalib and Mumin and Azurda, and all these poets. This rich literary culture was there. There was also another culture, which was that of what we think of as colonial modernity, things like Western education. The Delhi College, for instance. The Delhi College was established in 1825, and it taught Western subjects, modern sciences, all of that. And it was taught in English as well as Urdu. So it was a very progressive, new, exciting new thing. And there were some important intellectuals associated with it, like Master Ramchandar, like Mohanlal Kashmiri. These are people who are participating in a modern world. They have a modern worldview. They are questioning older norms. They are doing interesting new research. All of that. We sometimes forget, for instance, that we think that the earliest archaeological body is the Archaeological Survey of India, right? But there was an Archaeological Society of Delhi.
Yes, I've heard of it, yes.
At this point, and was already doing a lot of work which the Archaeological Survey later did. So it's a very vibrant place. Delhi had always been open to new influences. In fact, there was this young woman, Emma Roberts, who was actually a Calcutta person, but she came to Delhi and she remarked that Delhi people are so in with the latest trends. You know, she said that in no other place apart from Calcutta, which was a British city really, but she says in no other place have I seen that the people of the city are so fond of taking the latest architectural styles. So she says that, for instance, you know, you'll see these very European classical porticos and pediments and all. They will use this architectural style to build their houses. In fact, Bahadur Shah's younger brothers and his sons, they built a lot of buildings inside the Red Fort which were very European in their look, you know, and they used to wear those European clothes also. And there was a calligrapher, very important calligrapher, he is a very well-known calligrapher. He was known all over India, called Badruddin. Badruddin Muharkun, because Muhar, he used to make the seals also. So Badruddin was one person. What he said was, he started telling all the shopkeepers that, you know, I will design shop, you know, the signboard outside your shop in Roman script. So in English letters.
This is in Chandni Chowk.
So Emma Roberts was amazed. She says कि this is a place जहाँ पे English letters में सारे shops के names हैं. So and you can understand why that happens. It's a very, it's always been a cosmopolitan, outward-looking city.
And then the railways came into the area post-mutiny, and the civil lines was constructed to bring the imperial masters close to the vicinity of the walled city. So, when they suppressed the mutiny, did it have any effect on the structure and governance of Shahjahanabad? They did neglect it then.
Yeah. So what happens is that it is this vibrant culture that I'm painting for you, which is the poetry and the Delhi College, and all this is destroyed in 1857. Because
they deliberately neglected.
Not only neglected, it is destroyed, you know. Delhi College is closed down. At least these parts of it are closed down permanently. Then you have the emigration of a lot of people. For various political reasons, the British decided, of course everybody suffered, but they decided that the Muslims were responsible for the revolt of 1857. And they did it because they wanted to discredit the Mughal emperor and get rid of him for good. So they projected it as a sort of a conspiracy that had been hatched with Bahadur Shah and the royal family leading Muslims, which was a completely wrong evaluation. But
they fit it in with their divide and rule.
So what they did was, they specifically Muslims, they did not allow them to re-enter the city for 2 years. So many of them left. Some went away to Lahore, some went away to Rampur, Deccan. So a lot of the intellectual elite also dispersed. So the cultural life of the city was destroyed. Its political importance went, because even the little bit jo rahi sahi thi because of the Mughal emperor staying there, that also goes. The Delhi College, as I said, was closed. Delhi Archaeological Society goes. All of this happens. So its political importance shrinks. Physically, Chandni Chowk is destroyed. Jahanara's Sarai is broken down.
Literally, they break it down.
They break it down. They replace it with the town hall. The majority of the buildings inside the Red Fort are destroyed.
And yet, ironically, when it came to making, continuity and legitimacy as rulers, they come back to Delhi. And 3 coronations and the significant imperial darbar are all held like right next to the vicinity of Shahjahanabad. In fact, the Mughal, when they came, the British emperor and queen, they sat in the Jharoka like the Mughal emperor. Yeah. So it's quite ironical that, you know what.
But it's also very understandable. 1857, their whole idea is to get rid of this and punish the people of Delhi, and they do that. But
particularly the Muslims.
Yes. Yeah. But very soon after, they begin to realize that if they have to try to establish their own legitimacy, and they, with 1857, the British Crown takes over. The East India Company's rule comes to an end, and the British Crown, there's direct British rule over India. And to establish themselves and their own image and to replace the Mughal image with that of, say, Queen Victoria, who's the monarch, they have to again use Delhi as a setting. And therefore the first coronation darbar, where announcing that Queen Victoria is now Empress of India, Kaisar-e Hind, that happens in Delhi.
And again, then post independence, again in Shahjahanabad, the elite Muslim class moved away, as from many other parts of India. And how much was Shahjahanabad then affected? And it did become, while I think the elite Muslim class moved away, it did become a refuge for people coming from other parts of India.
Actually, very similar things happen as in 1857. There is a upheaval of population. What happens is that because violence, people have to leave their homes. A lot of people leave their homes. They take refuge in places like Humayun's tomb, Purana Killa, all of that. They become refugee places, and some of those people decide to leave permanently for Pakistan also. Some of them come back to their homes, but a lot of them leave. In their place come a lot of people who are migrating from
the other side,
West Pakistan, specifically. They come and they settle. So there is a change in the population. Delhi people going out, people from Punjab specifically coming in. So these are people who are not Delhi people. They don't have their experience of Delhi. So obviously there's a cultural change. But more importantly, there is also that. So cultural change is nothing new. Delhi has seen this all the time. Even today, I mean, look at in my generation, from the time I was in college to now, the demographic profile of the city changes. There are people from different places.
Even in the last 20 years, or even the last 15 years, I would say it has changed.
So that's the characteristic of a vibrant city like this, right? So that's not so much of a problem, or so much of an impact. The impact is good, is a lot, but that's nothing new. But what happens with 1947, which is kind of different, is that a lot more people come in suddenly than have left.
And of a different economic strata than what left.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happens is many of these people are people who are business people, or they want shops and all of that. So we all know that in that decade after independence, Delhi's population doubles. So houses for these new people are required. They are built in the form of new colonies. Remember, all your West Delhi, your colonies that are built, the so-called refugee colonies that are built. Housing is given to them there. As far as their needs for commercial spaces go, a lot of the havelis that had been rendered empty because their owners had fled are turned into commercial spaces. So a lot of what was a haveli, a residential mansion, becomes a katra. So these commercial spaces increase. That has had a deleterious impact on Shahjahanabad. It has gone from a typical mixed use kind of city
to a more commercial
thing. And one thing that had happened even earlier was that with the building of New Delhi, Shahjahanabad overnight became Old Delhi. It became Old Delhi, and it began to be seriously neglected. Neglect to pehle bhi ho chuka tha. There was neglect after the 1857, but it was nobody's priority anymore in the administration.
It was the other side.
Yeah. It was all attention was on New Delhi. So how the upkeep, maintenance, repair work, everything was allowed to deteriorate. So, and unfortunately, with the coming of independence and this pressure for commercial spaces, it became a commercial place, and you know, there's a difference of how something is kept up when it's a commercial, if you
And
just
as
have your
opposed
shop,
to a cultural and living city.
it becomes different. So that had a you know,
Detrimental.
I think we are still struggling with those aspects of Shahjahanabad.
You know, I wanted to come back to, you were talking of Urdu, and, you know, some say that the Delhi Gharana of music has also kind of developed. Today there's a rejection of Urdu as the national, you know, in some quarters it's almost rejected. You know, you were explaining what made Shahjahanabad just right, because of all this, you know, intermingling of cultures that Urdu could develop. And how much time did it take for the language to actually, you know, develop? We are talking of a language here.
So languages, of course, develop slowly, and when we look at languages in later generations, we find it very difficult to identify languages as they are spoken. Because we don't have access to that, right? We cannot hear people speaking the language. So what was the Khadi Boli, how it slowly begins to absorb different vocabularies. It's like us. हम लोग आज जब we say we are speaking Hindi, but how many, we use vocabulary which is coming from English, which is coming from Farsi, it's the same language, right? By the way, the language that today we call Urdu, till the middle of the 19th century, most people called it Hindi.
Yes.
There was no Hindi-Urdu divide was not there. It was called Hindi. Anyhow, so what happens with this language is, as far as the language that people spoke, it would have, in a very organic manner, been absorbing all sorts of vocabularies. What happens in the specifically 18th century becomes a big movement is to use this language for literary production, which is to write poetry. And that is what comes down to us. We don't have access to people speaking, but we have people. When it begins to be used as a literary language, that is what we have evidence of.
But like patronage, of course, was a major reason why Urdu and culture could develop, but that would be true of any kingdom. But why did it become Shahjahanabad became this center of culture and
I mean, it was not the only center. There were many.
But it was a major
centers.
center.
So what happens is that even when a lot of, because it's such a in its heyday, it had all this patronage and people had gathered here, poets had gathered here because they were getting patronage. When that patronage goes away, some of these people go away just because there's violence and they need to get paid, find something somewhere else. So people like Mir Taqi Mir and all, they all leave, right, in the 18th century, when all this anarchy begins to happen in the city and civil war and all that, so they leave. But eventually many of them still continue to live here. And when peace returns, when the East India Company has defeated everybody else and has become the ruler of Delhi, then a peace comes back and many of them then get a chance to again. So that culture never dies. It because it's there in the people of Delhi. So it just gets another lease of life.
Yeah, which I think is, honestly true. These traditions continue. Delhi is still in many ways the cultural capital. Writers, poets, artists continue to call it home and kind of stay here. So, now today, tell me that how do the residents of Shahjahanabad today perceive themselves? And, it's a mixed community and maintain their cultural identity.
Let me talk about how I'm a historian and I'm also somebody who is interested in heritage. And by that I mean that I'm interested in not only historic monuments but historic neighborhoods. And Shahjahanabad is a very important historic neighborhood which I am interested in. And I see Shahjahanabad, the most important thing about Shahjahanabad is that it is a historic neighborhood that is a living neighborhood. And why I think that is important is because how a neighborhood is built, its physical form, affects lifestyles also. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. If you contrast, say, old Delhi with New Delhi, New Delhi has these big, wide roads, phela hai sab kuch. You can't go from one end to the other without using some motorized transport.
And it's not a walking city.
It's not a walking. Even with all the pavements and all that,
yeah, it's not.
You
It's not
can't
a walking
really walk
city.
from one end to the other. Shahjahanabad, you can walk from one end to the other. There are people who, when I say why they want to stay here, he says सब कुछ पास है, सब कुछ पास है, everything I get over here. So it's a compact city. It is a compact city. It's not we tend to think of it as congested. There is open space, but there's open space within the courtyard. So these are courtyard homes. They are courtyard homes where you have privacy inside, you have open air inside, you can have a life inside, and you can even interact with your neighbors over the chats, without even coming out to the street. The streets are narrow, they are meant for people walking from one end to the other, they're not meant for transport. Even on the street, there is a life of the street which is not just traffic. You have in a morning, if you go, even before the shops are open and all that, particularly अगर थोड़ा सा अंदर गली में चले जाइए, there'll be people जो ओटले हैं वहाँ पे बैठ के चाय पी रहे हैं, न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ रहे हैं, लोगों के साथ बातें कर रहे हैं.
These are residents who come out of the homes.
So this is a lifestyle that promotes interaction with your neighbors. It has that kind of feel to it, which in these modern colonies often you don't have. And I feel sad that if the residents leave, and many of them have left because you have allowed the infrastructure to fall apart to such a extent that many people
and
find
amenities are not
so they have left, right? A lot of people are leaving. Commercial rampant, it's become a little uncontrollable commercial use, so that people have left. So that is a loss. Also, every time one of these havelis is knocked down, and they are listed as heritage and they are protected by law, but implementation is very uneven, and every time one of these havelis is lost, what you have is a solid block of flats or some showroom or something. That courtyard is lost, that courtyard house, the courtyard living, the openness, it's all gone. So I think it's facing a major problem, but we have to realize that if it is to be saved, it has to come on the basis of these courtyard homes, of these havelis. And I'm glad that some people at least are beginning to realize that these structures are an asset which
need to be conserved.
And to be conserved. There are examples of one or two heritage hotels that have boutique hotels that have come up, a cultural center. The more we have to start thinking, and internationally, there are neighborhoods, there are cities whose economies have been built on their history. We can do this, and why we need to do it is because this is what going to give livelihoods to the people who live there.
What is needed then? Political will?
Political will is needed. Some sort of a broader vision for Shahjahanabad. That today somebody who looks at a haveli does not see it simply as land which can be developed into some showroom or a block of flats.
The Delhi government had made some efforts and made some areas walk free and developed that walking the walkways, but does it make a difference to
that is mostly a cosmetic change. What we need is to see Shahjahanabad as an organic whole, to see what it requires, and most importantly, we should not look at it from the point of view of people who visit it. We have to look at it from the point of view of people who live there. How does it benefit them? How is their lifestyle, their way of living, their culture affected by a change? Is it good for that? Is it helping them? Once you look after that, the visitor will come. I think experts who have studied the
Conservation and
conservation
heritage, yeah.
and understand the city in collaboration with government agencies, with municipal bodies. It is sitting down together and chalking out what are the and it can be done. I give this example, for instance, of look at something like Kochi, their historic.
Yeah, a complete part of
commercially
it.
viable.
Yes, yes.
Pondicherry,
Yeah.
their historic, it's commercially of great
And these are
significance.
examples,
which
very
can be
close
followed.
to, yes, which can be.
Each of those Havelis, it doesn't have to be a very high-end boutique hotel. It can be a sari shop. But let me tell you, if I'm given a choice, even if I'm going to buy sarees, I would rather go to a lovely, beautifully done Haveli which is selling sarees
Yes.
than to a modern showroom.
Yeah,
right?
because the entire
it's got
charm and
is
this
there.
thing of.
Or there can be even a coffee shop. Even a coffee shop can open in one of these kind of buildings,
And how
right?
beautiful that would be. I'm completely. I cannot go to a mall.
Yeah.
I'm not against urbanization. I'm quite a city girl, but the feel that you get. In fact, urbanization is thought to be is of course we consider it damaging for conservation, but I feel the metro has actually opened up areas which I think Shahjahanabad or Chandni Chowk, whatever we choose to call it, it would be completely lost to the new generation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great opportunity if the government could use it and develop this little
There is
gem of a city in a city.
Absolutely. There is a conservation architect, Professor A.G.K. Menon. He's been in this field for such a long time, who was convener of one of the founder members of INTAC, in fact. And he always says that for Delhi, we should think of not heritage versus development, but heritage-led development.
How lovely.
Is what something like Shahjahanabad needs. We need development, but it should be guided by heritage. We should not think that heritage is against development, that we have to sacrifice development for heritage. We don't. In fact, if we use heritage as how to guide our development, it will really lead to better ways of, as I said, quality of life for citizens, better employment opportunities, better commercial opportunities, and a general upgradation. This is actual sustainable development has to come through heritage also.
So true. I really hope, Swapna ji, that somebody in government is listening to it, and this makes some difference, because truly it's a gem to be cherished, and and like you said, it's important for the people who live in Chandni Chowk. Thank you so much for joining us once again, and it was a real pleasure to have you on A Delhi Love. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swapna ji, for unraveling some of the rich layers of the walled city that are sometimes lost to the metropolis of Delhi. Narrow streets, tasty street foods, markets that sell all kinds of exotic wares. Old Delhi came alive to us all today. From the Red Fort to the Naubat Khana, Parathe Wali Gali to Kareem's, from the Riba to Sadar. There is so much to discover. Ride the metro into Old Delhi, hop into a rickshaw, or join a heritage walk through these historic streets. Shahjahanabad, Old Delhi, Chandni Chowk, whichever name you choose, is waiting to embrace us all with its enduring romance and magic.
Join us next time as we explore Delhi's hidden gems, people, places and stories on Delhi Love, Ishq Mohabbat Pyar. I'm Yasmin Kidwai. Until next time.